Hi everyone, my name is Shireen Yusuf and I am posting up this video on YouTube in response to a request from your professor. I believe you guys are doing a unit on Muslim-Christian dialogue, so she has requested that I respond to a prompt that she suggested, which is what I would like Christians to understand about Islam. And so I'm going to respond to that through this clip. But before I get into my response, I want to clarify something that I know is probably obvious, but it's something that I do feel the need to clarify, which is that, yes, I am Muslim, and I do like to think of myself as a practicing Muslim, but I by no means can speak on behalf of all Muslims everywhere, and I cannot speak for their experience and how they would respond to it. So to this prompt. So basically, I just want to clarify that what I'm saying right now, this is my own personal individual response to this, and that I am, not an Islamic scholar, so I'm giving my response as somebody who's Muslim, and my background is actually in communication studies. I have a master's degree in multicultural communication, so I really like to talk about dialogue, and I might talk about that a little bit in my response, but I just want to clarify that I'm speaking on behalf of myself. So to answer this question, what I would like Christians to understand about Islam. I think when I first saw this prompt, the first thought that came to my mind was that I would really, I would really just want Christians, and even people outside of Christianity, but especially Christians, to know is exactly how God-centric the religion of Islam is, and how all-encompassing this concept of Tawheed is. And I'm sure you have learned that the concept of Tawheed basically means the oneness of God. But I also feel that sometimes when we learn about Islam and we learn about Muslims, we learn about the practices of Muslims. So we learn about the fact that they pray 5 times a day, that we fast during the month of Ramadan, that we're required to do the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Saudi Arabia once in our lifetime. These are all true. But the purpose behind that, and the purpose of sort of our existence, really, is to try to seek nearness to God and closeness to God. That's why we pray 5 times a day, is to continue that conversation daily with God, and to constantly be reflecting and contemplating on our actions and our intentions. And that's the reason why we fast. Even the way that I'm dressed right now, for example, my understanding is that on a doctrinal level, the reasons why women and men are told to dress in certain ways is so that we keep ourselves God conscious even in the public spaces. So the way that we dress impact the way that we feel, and that's the reason why we dress a certain way. And of course there are broader social implications to a lot of that, for example, as a Muslim woman, when I dress this way, I also feel like I have, especially in this society, I feel like I have a level of agency and ownership over how people see my body and how people see me. So for me, it's actually been a very empowering experience. But again, going back to Tawheed, I think that's the one thing that I would want people to know the most, that I'd want to clarify the most, is exactly how God-centric this faith is. And to kind of illustrate this a little bit more and specifically bring it back to Muslim-Christian dialogue, I want to share a story of something that I experienced from when I was in high school. When I was in high school, I took a class called Humanities, and it was a fun class that my high school offered, and they basically taught, within this one class, we learned about art, philosophy, religion, history, things like that. And I remember the teacher that taught that class, I was his student aide for the year that he was my teacher, and he was a very devoted Christian, and he and I were talking once, and the purpose of this conversation was for him to explain to me why he actually chose to be a high school teacher instead of going and pursuing the ministry. But what's interesting is that's not even the part of the story that really stuck with me. Till today, I'm not entirely sure if I could articulate his reasoning. But what did stick with me with that conversation was that he was talking about why he was considering the ministry, and he was talking about his feelings about God. And what was really profound about that conversation was that when he was talking about his love for God, the love that he has for the grace of God, the fear of disappointing, like there was so much that he was talking about that it was as if he had reached into my own soul and had articulated how I myself felt about God. And it was so profound because it was coming from someone whose faith tradition I did not even share. And I know that there are differences among the faith traditions, and I understand that we shouldn't shy away from talking about those. But I also think that it's really interesting, especially for people who I think have the love of God in them. We tend to be drawn to other people who share that love. And, the people that we feel closest to sometimes share that love because that is a very strong emotion in and of itself that draws us to people, and it can be very, very powerful. And I think one thing to consider when entering into Muslim-Christian dialogue is how that can even play a part within, a conversation across faith lines. Because God is so central to the faith of Islam, like when you're talking to a Muslim about the love of God, God's grace, God's mercy, like we understand that, we know. And I know that, again, there are differences, but the love of God is it's so profound, and it shapes our lives. So that's one thing that I think I would want to talk to and get across to Christians. And the second thing that I would want to talk about, I don't want to go on for too long, so just really quickly, this is coming more so from somebody who studies communication, actually, is to understand that dialogue in and of itself, it's a two-way process in which you have two parties communicating with one another. And so part of allowing for dialogue to occur is to understand both where the person that you're speaking to is coming from, but also to understand where you yourself are coming from. So it's a kind of a reflective process as well. And that self-reflection can honestly often dictate the nature of that dialogue. So I think the other thing that I would want to encourage Christians, especially, I know that this isn't necessarily part of the prompt, what I would like Christians to understand about Islam. It's more so what I would like Christians to understand about Muslims is, first of all, that a lot of what we see, in the media, of course, is untrue. But on top of that, that there are implications for those representations on Muslims and Muslim communities. And we're kind of figuring our way out through it. So to understand where Muslims are coming from, the amount of pressure that we face to have to represent our faith in ways that I don't think other people of other faith traditions have to. And in a way, it's really unfair. And not all of us are Islamic scholars, so it's difficult because we know at any time someone can listen to something that we say and be like, look, I talked to a Muslim once and they told me this about Islam, and that one individual, if they have more power than we do or have more influence in society than we do, they can use that against all Muslims everywhere, and how unfair that is. So on the one hand, to understand when you're entering dialogue with Muslims where that Muslim is coming from, but also to kind of reflect on, as individuals, how you guys feel about Muslims, and to come to terms with how you might see Muslims. So, for example, when I say the word Muslim, do you have a specific image in mind of a person that looks a certain way, speaks a certain language, is a certain gender, something like that? That, Islam really is a very vast religion. It's been around for over 1,400 years. Muslims expand the entire globe, even considering the United States. I mean, if you think about it, it's ironic that Muslims are seen as foreigners, given that, from my understanding, Islam came to the United States through the slave trade. So, the presence of Islam in the United States long predates Muslim immigrants. So, I think that, oftentimes Muslims are reduced down to these very very oversimplified stereotypes that, yes, we do suffer from, but something that, if you grew up in this country, how can you not adopt some of them on your own? It requires taking out the initiative to learn about who Muslims are, what Islam is, in order to overcome those stereotypes. So I'm happy to be able to help with this. I'm pretty much took up way too much time as it is. So I just want to say, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on this. And if you have any questions, you can get my contact information from your professor. And also, I know that I'm not an Islamic scholar, but if you do have any questions about Islam specifically, I can always put you in touch with an actual Islamic scholar who could be much more articulate than I ever was throughout this video. But thank you again, and I hope that this was helpful in in this educational process about learning about Muslim-Christian dialogue. Thank you.